Wait, say it again. Erich Raeder, yeah, has hidden Bismarck from Hitler. Okay, what do you mean hidden? It's a 50,000-ton battleship. Okay, not hidden. He's just lied to Hitler about where it is. Wow, there's a good idea, yeah. Hey, I bet it would have been easier if it was Graf Spee or Deutschland. Why? He could just shove it in his pocket. See, pocket. Hello? Hello? Yeah. May 19th, 1941. The Battle of the Atlantic is in full swing, and the Kriegsmarine wages war against the supply convoys which sustain Britain. The mission is simple: sink the merchant ships faster than the Allies can replace them. And now Kriegsmarine Commander-in-Chief Erich Raeder is sending Germany's most powerful naval weapon to join the hunt: the mighty battleship Bismarck. I'm Indy Neidell. This is a World War II in real-time miniseries. Bismarck really is the most powerful naval vessel ever built by the German nation, and she is currently one of the most powerful ships on the planet. Commissioned in April 1940 and displacing 50,000 tons fully loaded, she's outfitted with a fearsome arsenal of weapons and an armored shell to match. Her main armament consists of 8 15-inch guns made by Krupp and arranged in 4 twin turrets, 2 forward and 2 aft, named Anton, Bruno, Caesar, and Dora, which fire 1,800-pound projectiles that will tear through up to 12 inches of armor plating. Along with this, she has a secondary armament of 12 6-inch guns mounted in 6 twin turrets, 3 along each side, which are primarily intended for engaging smaller surface targets like destroyers. Finally, she has an impressive suite of anti-aircraft weaponry: 16 4-inch guns, 16 1.5-inch guns, and 20 light 3/4-inch flak guns. In terms of armor, Bismarck is protected by a belt of Krupp steel, which ranges in thickness between about 5.5 and 13 inches. The deck is covered in 2 inches of armor, while the guns have armor 14 inches thick at the front and almost 9 inches at the sides. All in all, Bismarck's armored belt weighs over 17,000 tons. That's about 1/3 of her total displacement. Today, at about 2 a.m., Bismarck sets out for her first combat mission from Gotenhafen on the Baltic coast. Her mission, codenamed Operation Rheinübung, or Rhine Exercise, is to break out into the North Atlantic and run riot against the Allied merchant shipping sustaining Britain. Bismarck's commander is Captain zur See Ernst Lindemann. Soon after leaving Gotenhafen, Bismarck rendezvous with the Admiral Hipper-class cruiser Prinz Eugen, captained by Helmut Brinkmann. In overall command of this naval task force, the Seekampfgruppe, is Admiral Gunther Lutyens, who commands from Bismarck's bridge. Earlier in the year, Lutyens led the battle cruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau in a commerce raiding mission ranging from Greenland to the West African coast, during which he sank or captured 22 Allied merchant ships. The idea is to get the ships out into the Atlantic without encountering any British capital ships. See, Bismarck is a mighty ship, and in a one-on-one fight, she can take on any of the Royal Navy's battleships or battle cruisers, especially with Prince Eugen at her side. But they'd rather not have to fight such battles, especially as the British can muster far more than a single battleship or battle cruiser, not to mention aircraft carriers. That was the problem once the British began escorting convoys with capital ships. The hunting dried up for Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, so Raeder's orders are as follows. In contrast to previous directives to the Gneisenau-Scharnhorst task force, it is the mission of this task force to also attack escorted convoys. However, objective of the battleship Bismarck should not be to defeat in an all-out engagement enemies of equal strength, but to tie them down in a delaying action, preserving her own combat capability as much as possible. The primary mission of this operation also is the destruction of the enemy's merchant shipping. Enemy warships will be engaged only when the situation makes it necessary and if it can be done without excessive risk. Once out in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, it will be easier to avoid the enemy, and the Kriegsmarine has even deployed a fleet of tankers to replenish Bismarck's fuel, ammunition, and stores as necessary. Around noon, Captain Lindemann gives a stirring speech over Bismarck's loudspeakers, where he finally reveals the full details of their mission to the crew. The day that we have longed for so eagerly has at last arrived. The moment when we can lead our proud ship against the enemy. Our objective is commerce raiding in the Atlantic, imperiling England's existence. Let us hope for great success. I know that it has been, and will continue to be, the crew's sincerest desire to participate directly in Germany's final victory. I give you the hunter's toast, good hunting and a good bag. Bismarck and Prince Eugen steam westward to the Danish island of Lolland and then to the Fehmarn Belt, which separates Denmark from Germany. At dawn, the 20th, the ships enter the Kattegat, which separates Denmark and Sweden and leads to the North Sea. It is here that the task force is already spotted for the first time, when they encounter the Swedish cruiser Gotland at about 1 in the afternoon. Of course, the Swedes are neutral, so they don't directly tell the British. Instead, they tell a representative of the Norwegian government in exile in Stockholm, who passes on this sighting to the British naval attaché about 7 that evening. He forwards it to London, and it is added to a pile of intelligence, especially from ultra-decrypts of German Enigma messages, that indicate that a major Kriegsmarine naval sortie is underway. By then, Lucian's force has passed through the Kattegat and turned westward into the Skagerrak. As night closes in, the ships pass through a gap in the German minefield which guards the exit. At about 8:30, they round the Norwegian coast at Kristiansand and head north along the Norwegian coast. Members of the Norwegian resistance spot them and immediately send word by radio to London. Back to the big picture for a moment. Operation Rheinübung is more than just a military matter. It is very much part of Raeder's attempt to convince Adolf Hitler of his vision of the Kriegsmarine. See, Raeder wants a navy dominated by big surface ships that can compete with the British. Hitler has been both hot and cold on this, in part because he simply has less interest and understanding of naval warfare than land or air combat. He also has a somewhat scornful view of Kaiser Wilhelm's fleet. As he sees it, the Second Reich spent years and immense sums of money building a fleet to compete with the Royal Navy, and in the end, it did little to help Germany in the Great War. The other option on the table is that proposed by Karl Dönitz, who claimed that he could win the war with a force of 300 U-boats. Still, as Hitler took Germany closer and closer to a major European war, it looked like Raeder had won the battle. Hitler gave his approval to a highly ambitious naval expansion which prioritized surface vessels over submarines. Plan Ziel called for the construction of 10 battleships, 15 pocket battleships, 4 aircraft carriers, 5 heavy and 44 light cruisers, 68 destroyers, 90 torpedo boats, 27 ocean-going submarines, and 222 smaller U-boats by the year 1948. But progress is slow. Germany will never devote the industrial capacity necessary, so the Kriegsmarine is still nowhere near capable of going toe-to-toe with the Royal Navy. So for the most part, it has been Karl Dönitz's U-boats really fighting the Battle of the Atlantic. The powerful surface vessels that Germany does possess have played a role, sure, but it has been limited in comparison to that of the U-boats. By now, the U-boats have sunk around 3.7 million tons of Allied shipping, while surface ships have managed just 875,000. However, Raeder sees a chance for his surface fleet to make a real splash. Knowing, though, that he could not count on Hitler's approval, he deliberately withheld the full details of Operation Rheinübung. Once the ships are in the North Atlantic, he hopes to present it as a fait accompli, one that will bring glory to his surface fleet. Okay, now back to sea. Lutyens continues north along the coast of Norway. Around noon on May 21st, the task force drops anchor near Bergen, Bismarck in the Grimmastadsfjord, and Prince Eugen in Kalvanes Bay. Prince Eugen takes on fuel from the tanker Volin. Bismarck does not refuel, even though she left Gotenhafen 200 tons short and has burnt about 1,000 tons since then. Some sources blame Lutyens for this, while other sources say it was Lindemann who declined the opportunity. While the ships are at anchor, the British continue to track them. At about 1:15, Flying Officer Michael Suckling of RAF Coastal Command manages to fly his Spitfire in and snap photos that confirm the presence of a Bismarck-class battleship and an Admiral Hipper-class cruiser. Final confirmation comes later that evening about 6:30 p.m. when an ultra-decrypt from April 24th reveals that Bismarck has taken on prize crews. These are crewmen whose job it will be to sail captured merchant vessels. It confirms that a major raid on the convoy routes is imminent, so Bismarck will need to break out into the North Atlantic through one of 4 possible routes. The most northerly route was the Denmark Strait, between Iceland and Greenland. This had the advantage of being the furthest away from Scapa Flow, but the strait itself was narrower than shown on the charts because of pack ice off the Greenland coast and the possibility of mines off the Icelandic coast. The second route lay between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, and although battle cruisers would probably guard the route, it was the most direct of the passages. A third passage between the Faroes and Shetland was also a possibility, although its proximity to Scapa Flow made this one a really hazardous undertaking. The fourth gap, between Shetland and Orkney, was so close to Scapa Flow and the air bases on Orkney that it was virtually suicidal. Effectively, Lutyens' only 2 options were the Denmark Strait and the Iceland-Faroes Gap. At 7:30 p.m., Bismarck weighs anchor, joins Prince Eugen, and heads north out into the Norwegian Sea. By midnight, she's steaming north at 24 knots towards the Arctic Ocean. Meanwhile, the British are moving into position to intercept them. Lutyens' foe is Admiral John Tovey, Commander-in-Chief of the British Home Fleet, who has already deployed ships to try and stop the Bismarck's breakout. Rear Admiral Frederick Wake Walker's 1st Cruiser Squadron is on patrol in the Denmark Strait, with heavy cruisers Norfolk and Suffolk armed with 8-inch guns. Their job is not to engage, but rather to locate and shadow the German ships using their advanced radars and top speed of 31 knots. Between Iceland and the Faroes, Tovey has 2 light cruisers, Birmingham and Manchester. Another light cruiser, Arethusa, remains on standby at the British naval base at Havelfjord, Iceland. Again, their job is simply to shadow the German force. It is the Royal Navy's capital ships that will do the actual fighting. These will be deployed in pairs because of the extra power that Prince Eugen can offer Bismarck during engagements at less than 10 nautical miles. At midnight, Tovey orders Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland, commander of the battlecruiser squadron, to take the battlecruiser Hood and battleship Prince of Wales to a position below Havelfjord. Here, Holland can move to intercept the German task force, regardless of whether they pass north or south of Iceland. Tovey himself plans to sail tomorrow from Scapa Flow with the battleship King George V, carrier Victorious, and a small group of cruisers and destroyers. He will rendezvous with battlecruiser Repulse and then move out to cover the convoys at sea in the Atlantic while remaining available to assist Vice Admiral Holland. By the morning of the 22nd, Lutyens has decided he will take the Denmark Strait. This is probably a bit riskier than the Iceland-Faroes route, but during the day there's a steady stream of good news for Lutyens. At 11 a.m., he learns that German paratroopers have landed on Crete, stretching the Royal Navy's assets. Also, the local weather is overcast with low clouds and poor visibility, which Lutyens believes will help conceal him from any British ships or planes. On top of that, a German recon flight has reported that the capital ships of the Home Fleet are still at anchor in Scapa Flow. But that is not the case. Bad weather and dummy ships made of wood and canvas have fooled the German planes. Holland's ships are already on the move, and Tovey's group set sail early in the evening. At 11 p.m., Tovey sailed from Scapa Flow in King George V, accompanied by the aircraft carrier Victorious, 5 light cruisers, Aurora, Galatia, Hermione, Kenya, and Neptune, and 6 destroyers. The Repulse was ordered to steam northwards at full speed to join the rest of the force. That meant that during the night of the 22nd and 23rd of May, 2 groups of British capital ships were heading towards Iceland, with Holland's battlecruiser force a day's steaming ahead of Tovey. To the north, beyond the Arctic Circle, Bismarck and Prince Eugen were steaming westward towards the Denmark Strait. Lutyens still thought the Home Fleet was back in Scapa Flow, rather than steaming west at full speed to intercept him. As all this is happening, Raeder is meeting Hitler at the Berghof in Bavaria. Only at the end of the meeting does he slip in the important update that Bismarck and Prince Eugen are on the way to the Atlantic for Operation Rheinübung. Hitler is not pleased. Not only does he dislike having information withheld from him, but he worries the operation will lead Germany into a confrontation with the United States, especially when Raeder demands that Hitler declare the entire Atlantic north of 45 degrees a war zone. This is a distraction that Hitler does not want right now, especially with the invasion of the Soviet Union on the horizon. and he actually asked whether the ships can be recalled from their mission. Raeder stood his ground. He informed Hitler that the planning of Rhine exercise had already gone too far to recall the ships, and that no one in the Kriegsmarine would understand a sudden recall at this late date. The discussion ended with the Führer, whose mind was now fully concentrated on the final preparations for the pending invasion of the Soviet Union, in an uncharacteristically indecisive mood. Well, perhaps now you have to leave things the way they are. But I have a very bad feeling. Grand Admiral Raeder returned to Berlin fully aware that both his career and the future of the surface fleet rested with Rhine exercise. Out in the Atlantic Ocean, the British are doing their best to ensure that the future of Bismarck is as short as possible. Tovey's gang meets up with Repulse in the early hours of the 23rd, by which time Bismarck and Prince Eugen are approaching the northern end of the Denmark Strait. By midday, they are north of Iceland, clinging to the edge of the shelf of pack ice extending from the Greenlandic coast to avoid the minefield the British have laid off Iceland's Hornstrandir Peninsula. By that afternoon, Tovey has a good hunch where the German ships are. The two southernmost passages have been checked and double-checked by reconnaissance planes with no sign of the enemy. This leaves the Iceland-Faroes Gap and the Denmark Strait. Tovey's hunch is that Lutyens will take the strait, but a hunch isn't quite enough to go on. What he really needs is a sighting. This he finally gets when Bismarck and Suffolk spot each other at pretty much the same time. At 7:11 p.m., alarms go off aboard Bismarck and Prince Eugen when a lookout spots the enemy about 8 nautical miles away in the fog. Prince Eugen's code team decipher the ship's radio signals and identify it as Suffolk. The scenes are similar on Suffolk. At 7:22 p.m., able seaman Newell, his binoculars watching the Suffolk starboard quarter, shouted, "Ship bearing green 140. A moment later, 2 ships bearing green 140. There they were, emerging out of the mist like charging behemoths, about 7 miles behind the Suffolk, but quickly overtaking her. The Suffolk was dangerously close to the massive 15-inch guns on the Bismarck's 2 forward turrets, Anton and Bruno. A quick shiver of fear ran through Captain Ellis. He'd hoped, even expected, to spot her first. He had no plans to become her first victim. Full ahead both, hard a port. The chief engineer fed full power to her screws as the Suffolk heeled to the right, making for the edge of the fog bank. Suffolk's captain, Robert Ellis, waits in the fog for Bismarck to pass by. He powers up his radar and then tucks himself in about 13 nautical miles behind the German battleship. At this range, he can stay in radar contact while still having time to run or hide in the fog if Bismarck swings around to attack. Soon, he's joined by Norfolk, which has been steaming hard to catch up. In fact, Norfolk is steaming so hard, she almost runs into Bismarck. The battleship's aft turret, Caesar and Dora, let loose 5 salvos, which come crashing down near Norfolk, shooting up 60-meter-high columns of water. Norfolk hurries for cover in a bank of fog. After that, silence falls across the Denmark Strait on the evening of May 23rd. Norfolk has taken little more than a few popped rivets as damage, and she falls in behind Bismarck too. The 2 ships tail Lutyens to port and starboard at a distance of 16 to 22 nautical miles. Try as he might, the German commander cannot shake them, though he darts and weaves, lays down smoke, and orders feint attacks. All night long, Suffolk's radar sweeps the sea ahead as Captain Ellis updates the Admiralty on Bismarck's position. Hood and Prince of Wales were less than 300 miles away and closing fast. On board the Hood, when Vice Admiral Holland heard that the Bismarck had been sighted, he worked out the positions of the 2 forces on the chart, then ordered an increase of speed to 27 knots and altered course to 295 degrees. His plan was to intercept the German ships before dawn the following day. He knew that, despite their individual handicaps, the Hood and the untried Prince of Wales could take on the Bismarck, while Wake Walker's 2 cruisers could keep the Prince Eugen occupied. At least on paper, it looked like he would enjoy a superiority of both numbers and firepower over his German opponent. And that is where I will leave us today. Whatever happens tomorrow, we are set for an incredible clash as these titans close in on each other. HMS Hood is the pride of the Royal Navy, and Prince of Wales is the nation's most modern battleship. Surely the 2 of them are up for the job. Will this be another triumph in Britain's long and illustrious naval history, or will the upstart Kriegsmarine finally take the old enemy down a peg or 2? You will have to join us next week to find out how Hood and Prince of Wales fare against Bismarck. And once that episode is uploaded here, you should be able to click on the end card right about now to watch it straight away. That's for you watching in the future. To make sure we can keep making you more miniseries like this, join the TimeGhost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. TimeGhost Army Bismarck Buddy of the Week is Adi Haskell, and these are the newest commissioned officers. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.